Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 17th meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board. Before I ask for public comment, I'd like to simply make one of my own. It cannot have escaped people's notice that the town has been through an unusually rough last week. And it would be glib to say that we were very lucky compared to other towns because there's been a lot of damage, especially to people's roads, driveways, and crops. But I do feel fortunate that we did come through as well as we did. And a large part of that is due to the work of our town workers. The fire department and Richmond Rescue, who are not town workers, but cooperating to evacuate residents. The highway department and the water and sewer department keeping services going. The water and sewer department did a fantastic job. The plant is in great shape, thanks to them. They basically didn't sleep for a few days. The highway department, I don't think slept either. Fire department, same thing. I also want to thank all the volunteers, the people who live here in Richmond who put together the resource spreadsheet, the people who worked and helped each other dig out, pump out the basements. It's nice to see the spirit of community that we always speak about here in New England right there in front of you. I also would like to share my condolences with the family of the young lady who was lost in Huntington Gorge the other day. And I thank the Richmond Rescue and other agencies for their work retrieving the body. Is there any other public comment that people would like to make?
One other, I'd like to note the passing of Nicole Killian, served on Richmond Rescue. And her untimely passing, I think she had just finished her doctoral studies on vacation, was had served in Richmond Rescue for a number of years. I think I met her when she was probably 8 years old. So a long time resident of our community and contributors to Richmond Rescue and our healthcare system. Huge loss.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Lisa?
Yeah, I just have to think back about when the water tower or water tank was approved for purchase and construction. It's a good thing we had it.
Mm-hmm.
Can't imagine, would have been a lot of water trucks in here or nothing.
Right.
There was a lot of discussion about the size of the water tank and
I heard
whether
there was
that
opposition
size
too.
was necessary. And the prevailing direction the board went with at the time was we needed it that big for fire protection.
Mhm.
But we
Or
used it
anything else.
exclusively during the storm to provide safe water.
Yeah.
And even with conservation measures, we almost ran it dry.
Mhm.
But if it weren't the size that it is, we would not have had the water that we had.
Exactly. It was foresight that people didn't realize they even had. They did.
So is there any other public comment from people in the room? Jack?
Yeah, I don't know if any of you know it, but our end of Richmond is the last night's storm will be much more costly to the town of Richmond than last week's storm. All you gotta do is drive up the Huntington Road, or the Hillview Road, and it's gonna be very, very costly. And with that said, the select board needs to be very careful about the money they're spending. One of the things I really strongly feel is sell the cars before they're old. Personal experience is cars are not 1951 Mickey Mouse baseball cards. They lose their value. The brakes will see mice will get into it. I've had this experience many times. Mice will get in those cars and they will lose their value because of technology's changing constantly. I think you can save a lot of money by getting rid of those.
Okay. Any public comment from anybody joining us via Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Oh, go ahead.
I received an email from the organizers of the Round Church Women's Run that was scheduled for this coming Sunday. You guys approved it a couple months ago. They're going to postpone that and potentially do it back sometime in September. But they realize what the town's been through the last 7 days and they don't want to proceed with the run, which I think is a good idea. And I thank them for their thought.
Cochrane Road is impressive, impressively damaged.
Yeah. Okay, are there any additions, corrections, deletions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Our first item of business is an update on the July 10th and 2023 flooding, but I think we can also safely allow for discussion of yesterday. And I'm going to turn that over to Josh to start.
Okay, so I think you covered some of it from the flooding that we had last week. And again, I want to express a big thank you to all of the town staff that was involved in assisting residents, preparing for the flood, responding to the flood, and protecting town infrastructure. I think everybody did a really great job. In the initial flood, we had about 13 single-family homes with fairly minor damage, which consists of flooded basements and mechanical units. There was no residents that I'm aware of that had floodwaters on the first floor. It was all basement, which I think is fairly lucky considering how high the water rose. Homes are mostly located on Bridge Street, Esplanade, East Main Street, Concord Road, and Johnny Brook Road. We did have one business on East Main Street that got some first floor flooding. Actually, I think a couple businesses over there in the thrift store area and the gun shop, I think, had some first floor damage on those businesses. We had one significant washout on Dugway Road, but the road was passable as of Wednesday morning after the flood. And there were a few other minor spots, but nothing really significant to the flood that started last week. That was not too hard on the roads. Volunteers Green was completely flooded. The parking lot, though, held up well as the new sidewalk. There was some undermining of the sidewalk right there. And we lost a small section of pavement that Pete was able to pave back pretty quickly, and he was able to replace stone underneath the sidewalk pretty fast. The playground got pretty well dug out. It's down 3 or 4 feet, but maybe more in some areas. Pete scooped all of that out. His plan is to put larger rock in there to really stabilize that, keep the playground upright. He doesn't think that the playground itself suffered much damage. It just sort of started to lean, so he'll recorrect that. He's also going to power broom off pretty much the entire park because it's covered in a few inches of mud that's now drying and becoming sort of dusty. And that river flood mud is not all mud. There's a lot of sewer overflows upstream of here, so it's pretty nasty stuff. The concession stand was completely flooded. That actually got cleaned out mostly on Saturday, so it just needs to be more cleaned and disinfected. From water and wastewater, as I think Jay covered a bit, we got off pretty easily. The wastewater treatment facility ran throughout the entire flood, thanks to some hard work from Steve and Brad the night before, sort of the morning of. It ran the entire time. They got back in there Wednesday morning and everything had been running as normal. There was never any problems with that equipment. The pump station, which is on the other side of the bridge, did shut down during the event, but when the water receded, there was actually a bit of an air pocket in there where all the mechanicals are for that pump. So it fired right back up on Wednesday morning. There's a couple of smaller items, I think a sump pump and a float that might need to be addressed, but that started up the next day and began to pump sewage back over the bridge to the treatment facility. The water pump house was flooded minimally. I think only a couple inches of water got in there, but some water did get in there. The clear well, which is the last part before the water that's pumped out of the ground, is the last holding tank before it enters into the system. That had flood water in there. When we opened it up on Wednesday morning, it was pretty gray, you could tell. But luckily, the staff had shut off the pump, isolated the entire system from the pump. So everything was running off of the tank. They had a full tank at about 24 feet. So starting Monday night through Saturday, we were operating completely off the tank. The levels fell from about 24 feet to 13 feet. So about half the tank was used in that time frame. There was concern we were going to be on a boil water notice for 10 days. That was on about Thursday, but the state was actually able to get those tests done quite a bit earlier with the help of several text messages from Steve from Water Resources to kind of urge them along. But we were able to lift that boil water notice on Saturday evening, which was, I think, very welcome news for everybody, and great work by the water and sewer staff getting that completed and getting the boil water notice lifted. Let's see, what else from this last flood? We talked about the water notice.
158.
Okay, as far as farms go, we did have Far Farm, Jericho Settlers Farm, Maple Wind Farm, and Connet Farms were also flooded. in a direct response to the organization here, Susan Whitman, local resident, she set up shop out in front of the town center on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I think part of yesterday. She was great in hearing from residents what they needed and then getting resources from residents that volunteer, connecting everybody, not just on Esplanade, but she was working on other parts of the town as well. She did a tremendous effort and started stockpiling water or other supplies, created a Google sheet that was able to connect people directly. So thank you hugely to her to help get that going. Fire department did monitor floodwaters on Monday night. They evacuated Esplanade and Bridge Street early Tuesday morning at about 4 a.m. They did a great job keeping people safe. There was concern at one point on Tuesday that a dam upriver might break. There was concern about how high that water would go. That's why they elected to evacuate Church Street. All the water never reached really beyond the town center, and they got into the parking lot of the town center. It did get into the basement of the town center, into the lower crawl spaces. But the fire department was out there during the storm pumping that out, and the large majority of the town center basement only got maybe an inch of water in there, and it was minimal damage to anything that was down there, which was really, really good. Highway crew was able to get out and quickly assess roads, and they got things back up on Wednesday pretty quickly. As I mentioned, from that one, there was not a lot of road damage. And yeah, in relation to the wastewater pump going down, we had to call P&P Septic because there was nowhere for that sewage to go, which is backing up in the system. So P&P Septic came starting during the storm on Tuesday, every 4 hours, pumped it out, and then they actually just drove it up to the school, put it back into our system. We were able to treat it, so we didn't have to pay anybody else to treat that. So that was a creative solution to what we had going on there. Then last night we had really, I think, 2 downpours that came pretty back to back. And like, from what I could see, looking at some rain gauges, they were about 1.5 inches or more each, and they came within like 20 minutes. So I think the first one was at around 4 or 5, and Pete was calling me with, I got all these roads out, washouts, and then another one came in at 7, and even more came out. So as of this morning, let me just pull up, make sure I get the right update here. We had Stage Road closed, Cochrane Road closed, and the top of Snipe Ireland was also closed. There were sections of Huntington Road, Hillview Road, and Williams Hill Road reduced to 1 lane, and also sections of Jericho Road, primarily between Valley View and Southview. So there were multiple areas of side erosion of the roads throughout the day. Also lots of driveways, lots of water over driveways, either over a culvert or around a culvert. So anything that's in the right of way, Pete's working on trying to fix residents. His priority was really get roads open and then work on driveways. He did call in contractor John Scott, his local excavator. He was primarily working on Cochrane Road today, while Pete took care of a few of the other roads. At the end of the day today, they were able to get Stage Road open to traffic. And I just got an update from Pete that I think he said they're going to reopen Cochrane Road overnight, but they're going to be closing it again tomorrow to resume work. But it will be open this evening. As of now, all the roads are open, but in very rough shape with 1 lane in most places. But they've been working. I mean, they were here till midnight last night, got back in at 4 or 5 this morning, and have continued to work at least a 12+ hour day again today. So yeah, this flood really put them into overdrive. And the main difference was the first flood was slow water rising on the river, not super fast. And these last storms, it came down so quick. It was all the side tributaries, and it just rushed through and cut through roads. We did also have, according to account that zoning administrator Tyler Masha was able to make today, looks like we had about 10 more single-family homes with damage. 2 of them quite significant on Cochrane Road. There was a bit of a mudslide, took out an apartment on the first floor of that, filled it with mud. And then actually,
Where was that?
this was on Cochrane Road, just before the cemetery.
Okay.
And then I think it also got across the street into the residents across the street. So there was a bit more first floor damage from this one on residents. But there was about 10 more single family homes from last night. I do also know that the daycare, they lost a lot of their playground. It got just covered in mud and floodwaters, but not much got into the actual structure. So I think they're kind of counting their blessings a little bit on that one. I think they'll be able to reopen for childcare hopefully shortly. Just kids can't go outside, which is kind of a bummer in the summer, but at least you got some childcare still. FEMA representatives showed up here this morning, and they went out and started to tour. So Tyler gave them a list of everywhere that he knew where there was damages. And these are for the individual assistance. So this isn't FEMA for the town roads. This is more for individual residences and businesses. We put that information out on a big email list as well as Front Porch Forum and the website. And anybody who didn't get visited by FEMA who has damages, there's a phone number on the website that you can call and report your damages. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to cover it. What they're doing now is gathering data. And then that goes, I guess, sort of back up the chain at FEMA for a decision on what type of assistance they can give to people. So yeah, I think that's most of the updates. I think we've got probably a few weeks of work ahead of Pete here, working on putting these roads back together from last night. It was pretty bad. We are expecting more rain tomorrow, according to the emergency operations update. It's looking like more of the downpour variety, but not as heavy as we had on this past Sunday. So hopefully that holds true. We don't get a lot more flash flooding because right now the roads are, they're susceptible. There's a lot of, saturated ground out there. The roads have been damaged already. So I don't think it would take a whole lot to really wash them out again. But let's hope it goes easy on us tomorrow because we sure could use a break.
Well, my thanks once again to everybody who put in all that work. The ground, go ahead.
Josh, didn't Rod West pump out the town?
He did.
Yeah, Rod was here. Rod was also over at Volunteers Green helping to retrieve a dumpster out of the woods yesterday. One of our dumpsters that's up by water and wastewater plant floated like down past the soccer fields. So Rod obviously, as Rod always does, he jumps in and really helped out a lot with retrieval of those things with the pumping here. So yeah, he's been great, but so there's been a lot of residents who've and that's the other thing. Thanks to all the residents for their patience, their perseverance, and helping their neighbors out. It's really been incredible to see.
And it's all a blur in my mind, but I think I saw on social media that Rod's property was damaged last night. No.
Okay, I think that's awesome.
It would not surprise me given the configuration of his land. I wanted to point one other thing out about Volunteers Green. I want you to imagine what the Volunteers Green parking lot would look like now if it had not been paved. It would be a 10-foot deep crater.
You're gone. Yeah. It'd all be on the green.
So, one silver lining might be that, since we had the disaster declaration from the Monday storm, that's carried over, is my understanding, is carried over to the storm last night. So that, FEMA is involved, can be involved in the storm last night as well. It's my understanding is that it's one disaster declaration and they're here and they get to do both.
Okay.
So I think damages, I think this is particularly significant for the town because I think the town took a much worse hit yesterday than it did on the Monday flood. And it takes a long time. I mean, I think we're still I think we've only recently, or maybe not even yet, gotten reimbursed for some past FEMA floods. And that was years ago.
We're still waiting on the check for the 2019 culvert replacement on Thompson Road.
Yeah.
So it takes a while, but assuming that the federal government is good for the money, we will get it back. So I think that's good. I had a couple of questions just on logistics. I'm not suggesting that they do this, but is the town going to do any trash pickup?
So on Wednesday morning, I ordered 3 dumpsters for areas that were affected. So we got a dumpster over on Esplanade. There was a dumpster up on Johnny Brook for an area up there, and a dumpster on East Main Street that we put out there for there. I think each one of those, well, Johnny Brook was one dumpster. Esplanade is going to be removed and replaced tomorrow. And then we'll have, I think the one on East Main Street was removed and 2 were brought back in today. And I followed up with FEMA as far as just what we need to do is make sure we're documenting that the dumpsters are there, that they're filled, get the receipts, and those should be able to be reimbursed as well. I didn't get any requests today, but I should follow up to see, because I'm sure Cochrane Road is going to need some. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And I'm curious whether Mary Hoole's property got flooded on Monday. The property, the FEMA buyout property. Did that go underwater?
So I talked to Mary on Wednesday. She had some flooding on her land over her leach field by where her mobile home park is, I think, down
Yep.
closer to the road.
Yep.
And she was asking for help pumping that out because there was standing water on the FEMA land that once she pumped that out was going to flow into that area. So my understanding is, yes, there was water there. I don't know how much though.
Well, I walked by there Friday and Saturday, and it looked like the water had just come right back
Okay.
because, I mean, there's just so much water.
But her property specifically, we bought that out as a
Okay.
part of a FEMA buyout. If it had gotten flooded again, I would count that as a success. You know, that it didn't happen again.
Right.
And the one thing that I would disagree with you on is not minor damage from the Monday flood. The house on Cochrane Road, this is the second time I've shoveled out that basement. You know, it was damaged quite significantly during Irene. And this was close. It wasn't into the first floor, but it was up to the floorboards. And it was pretty bad. I'm wondering if, you know, if we should, or they should, or if anybody should consider a buyout of that particular property, because it's going to happen again.
That's something FEMA actually has that's one of the criteria that they look at.
How many times?
Which road is that, or which house
This
is that?
is the one on Johnny Brook Road. It's Mike Rosenfield.
Oh, the Johnny Brook Road house. Okay.
Yeah, FEMA,
You know,
FEMA
I'm
has
not, you know, I don't want to force him out of his house, but you know, it's something that if I were him, I would consider. And we have to be involved, is my understanding, because we have to take over the property if the town has to take over the property if there is a buyout.
There are two, I think, sort of decision points. One is you elevate the house, because this has happened some properties in the town of Richmond, where you raise it by like 3 feet, and then you make it such that floodwaters can essentially go underneath it. So you raise all your infrastructure up above. So that's one approach if you're close to the edge of the
John Cart did that.
Yeah, and then the other is you just like kind of stop building houses here, repairing houses here, and it's a buyout as you just went. That
yeah.
FEMA process to get to that. Right?
that point about how you build so the water can flow through. I went down to southern Mississippi after Katrina. And you guys probably can imagine what that looked like. All the houses built using modern techniques were gone. It looked like a giant scan and just swept it. But Jefferson Davis's house, which was built in the 1850s, it was built in that manner to say, let the water go through, don't try to hold it back, and it was still there. So there are ways to build things that you'll get water through the house. It's not going to be bone dry, but the house will still be there.
I went around on Esplanade Street Tuesday. And the thing that really impressed me is the resilience of the people who live on that street. They appeared to have learned not to store too many valuable things down in the basement. And they were incredibly appreciative of the support they were receiving from the town. I'd like it to give a shout out to Sue Whitman again for her initiative to set up, a tent in front of the town center for a week and set up that spreadsheet. It was really admirable, and it really was incredibly, and still continues to be incredibly helpful. There are over 100 people who signed up to help on that spreadsheet.
Right. We're in that interesting
Amazing.
position of having more people saying, I want to help. Who needs help? But after last night, I imagine there will be plenty of
There'll be
takers.
plenty of takers. So I agree with you, Jay, that it was a really good example of community spirit.
Lisa, any thoughts?
Yeah, Spence Construction, who hauls gravel and does roads and so forth. We lost our road last night. It was impassable. It had ruts this deep and this wide.
I
and
heard
it was
about that.
unbelievable. Where was that on? Maple Hill off of Hinesburg Road. Oh, yeah, it's a private road, so we own it, but
Up
It's,
next to the Buck Farm.
Yeah.
I sent him an email 9:30 last night, and I woke up this morning about 7 to the sound of trucks. I look out and there he is.
Oh, cool.
He's there. Yeah.
Mhm.
All that work he's got to do. We hired him for plowing, so we've got a relationship with him for a whole neighborhood. But I tell you what, he put us first. We're second, but we're right up at the top of the
That's
list,
awesome.
and it's done. It looks wonderful. Now I can see if FEMA will pay for it.
Yeah.
My road, Murray Drive, was all washed out on one side, but not my side, because I had spent just coincidentally, I had cleaned my ditch out, the ditch that runs past my side of the road
There you go.
thoroughly 2 weeks ago. So it didn't wash out on my side. But it's still the same road. But yeah, it just reminds us that there are a lot of precautionary things that, we thought Irene has happened. When is that going to happen again? And as it's been said, we have now 100-year floods every 10 years.
Oh, this was easily the fifth 100-year flood since
Yeah.
I've been on the
The
board.
world's a change.
Yep.
It really is.
Yeah. In case you haven't gone up, you should go up. I've been here over 45 years. And that's the worst flood, worst damage to any road I've seen is to go up the Huntington road. Yeah, but in daytime, it's just
Dug right out.
at night it's.
Which road? I'm sorry.
The Huntington Road or Hillview.
Hillview. Okay.
There hasn't been a road like that I've seen since I've lived here.
Mhm.
You must have gone up the Huntington Road, up to Hillview and go over. I mean, you're losing about 1/3 of the asphalt. And the same thing on the Hillview Road.
Mhm.
It's gonna cost Uncle Sam or cost Pete a lot of work, And I hope this FEMA thing continues up to last night too.
How did Cemetery Road come out?
Cemetery's passable. It flooded at the Hinesburg and water. I don't know where all that water came from. It just kept coming down.
Came up Hinesburg somehow,
I
yeah.
know.
But yeah, where, maybe up by her house, kind of
Yeah,
coming down and
yeah,
around.
It was.
We got
Oh, and
hammered.
once it gets ahead of steam, it just.
Yeah.
Away.
But
It kept, I went back there like
Yeah,
2
but
o'clock this afternoon, it was still going.
I drove back and forth all day long. I was hauling gravel for people. Driveways up or where it would, and it was, but the Huntington Road is just absolutely amazing by where Marquis lives. It's go up there in the daytime. It's
And Jack, did culverts get plugged up there or were they overwhelmed?
Where? I was overwhelmed. It all came down. Everybody thinks they're ground zero, but I think Williamsville was ground zero. And it just came down so fast, come across Cemetery Road underneath there. And as it went down, it skipped over driveways and washed out pavement, asphalt, 6 feet deep. It's pretty impressive to go up and look at it and you drive over around it. It's and I hope FEMA pays for that because your budget is going to be blown by the work that's needed on the road.
Yeah, well, that's what, there's two types of FEMA assistance, IA and PA. IA is individual assistance, PA is public assistance.
Yeah.
The PA people haven't even, I don't think they've even started yet.
I think they started looking at other parts of the state, but they haven't gotten to Richmond yet.
Yeah, but Southern Vermont.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can, I don't even know if you can yet get into Weston because all the roads were washed out. It is impressive how powerful water really can be. After the first flood, we were finding the picnic tables from Stone's Throw all the way down by the water treatment plant in the middle of a field in basically knee-deep mud. And then just the way it destroyed roads.
The pavement of paving department saved a lot of money.
Yeah,
Saved a lot of gravel from down below.
yeah.
Yeah, Jack, I'm on the other side of that hill,
Yeah.
so like, I agree with you. I've lived here for 40 years and I've never seen so much water in Johnny Brook. Except when the beaver dams break. But this was different because it was more sustained. It was in the river. And it was like way over my bridge on Johnny Brook. Like I've never seen it like
I
that.
was coming back from Cleveland at 8 o'clock last night.
Ooh,
And I see water coming out of the woods on the Hinesburg Road, which you've never seen water, streams of water. coming out.
yeah.
Linda Parent has a message in the chat.
Okay, yep.
Sorry, we're still getting an echo over here.
Yeah, that's me.
Hey, what technical issues here in the room. Linda Parent notes that Neighbor Helping Neighbor from Huntington will be accepting monetary donations to assist flood victims. We're probably all getting a lot of emails from people. Vermont Public, for example, has a Vermont Assistance Fund. We just got to remember, which it's been said before, but not tonight at the meeting. If somebody comes to your house and says, I'm here from FEMA,
Yep.
any FEMA employee will be carrying ID.
If anybody else heard this, it was kind of fascinating to hear on Vermont Public, the history of rivers in Vermont.
Yes. that's what I did.
And apparently it was a thing for something like 150 years. It was considered prudent to straighten out the streams and
Oh, God,
rivers
that's,
and to take out the things that were in the river, slowing it down. Among other things that help for timber drive, like you could put stuff in it and would go. And also beavers. There was some astounding number, like 400 million beavers in the United States, and still till they started exterminating them. And just to the point of beaver
Almost
dams mixed around with woods without roads really slowed down this stuff, right? And it's not lost on any of us that these roads that go up and down the hill are where the water goes to. My back hill is probably 30 degrees, had water flowing all the way across it, just and it was like waterfalls coming down, but there was no place to go to wash out. So it kind of just did its thing.
we always use the example of Greystone as the example of a road severely affected by floods. Is it even still there?
I still, yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
it's fine.
Yeah,
It got, you know, about 10 years ago, it got really beat.
Yeah,
Um,
it washed away.
and you know,
But this time it made it.
a
Okay.
road that really surprised me that held up really pretty well was Kenyon Road.
Yeah.
Like, go figure, you know, I mean, the work that Pete did on Kenyon Road has made it one of the better roads in town.
And the only reason it finally went was one of the big culverts was plugged.
yeah, because I heard that down by the rock quarry, there was some damage, is what Pete was saying.
Is that Kenyon?
Yeah, because the culvert up there plugged, so it just took out the shoulder of the road.
So right before that, this was after the second
Yeah.
downpour.
The
I
first
went
one
up there,
didn't touch it.
yeah, I went up after the first one and go, wow, we dodged a bullet.
Well, the first
Yeah.
one plugged the culvert.
Kenny Road was the only way we were getting around town on
Yeah, I
last
know.
week.
Yeah.
It was, Josh was like, I can't get to the office. And I said, well, technically speaking,
On my way.
if you can go up Kenyon, go left, go to Governor Peck,
That's what I
come to
did.
Jericho.
That's how I got in.
It's 12 miles. I had to
Did a few
drive,
times last week.
when I drove the cruiser, I had to drive 12 miles in order to get back. And, oh, and by the way, I got 6 miles to the gallon. Took me 2 gallons of gasoline to get from the town center to my house.
Okay, so I'd just like to, I can tell by the people on the Zoom that most of you are here for police related issues, but I just want to ask, are there any questions or comments from anybody on the Zoom about anything relating to the flood? Being none. Okay, well, again, let's cross our fingers. You know, they say these things come in threes. Let's hope that they don't.
Yeah, really.
Let's count yesterday twice and then we're done.
There you go.
That works.
Rain 2 times.
We had
Okay.
2 downpours.
So our next item on our agenda goes back to the whole how much we owe our municipal employees. We've listed the multiple times how much work that highway, fire, water and sewer, town administration, I mean, really everybody who works for the town plus Richmond Rescue really stepped up. And my suggestion to Josh was, could we hold an employee appreciation event? I do not recall, since I've been on the board, us doing anything like that. Have we done something like that in the past?
I only remember holiday and retirement events, not an appreciation per event per se.
Well, I'd like to do something, you know, we could mail out bonuses to everybody, but I'd like a chance to, you know, thank people. And so my suggestion was that we hold some kind of employee appreciation event. Now, I'm just one person. I did ask Josh to reach out to the department heads. I don't see that. Did you hear back from Pete?
I don't know if I heard back from Pete. I did hear,
A little busy.
yeah,
A little bit.
I did hear back from, let me see, a full email because I got a couple more today. Rescue said that they would like to do weekend. And there was a few more midweeks in there. It said that would be better. So it feels like weekend work better for, I think, Linda and Rescue. Everybody else sort of seemed to say midweek would do all right.
Okay.
So
So-
I wonder if this is the right time. You know, like, if I were Pete, I would rather have a nap than,
No, I'm not saying do it this week. I'm saying, you know, maybe we do it in early August or something when we've had a chance to catch our breath.
I would think maybe fall. Frankly, you know, I mean, this is gonna take a while for us to all digest and it's still summertime.
Right.
So after the hurricanes, before the snow.
Yeah, right.
But is there anybody who's philosophically opposed to the idea of having something like that?
God, no.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
Mhm. Okay, so I do think that we don't, they're gonna be out there working hard for quite a while longer. I want to thank them when the job is done. We can thank them until then. We can send them. If anybody wants to take cookies by the highway department, you know where to find them.
It's a good
So
suggestion.
I think this experience shows us that our employees are some of the town's greatest assets, and that needs to be
Mhm.
recognized and rewarded.
Just a thought. I don't know if we want to like document some of this for posterity.
No, I think we should.
And, having a roaming videographer just go follow one of the crews around.
They
for-
did. The MMCTV did that.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, for a sustained period and multiple.
Well, I
months?
don't know, the high school and middle school students put together a video. I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
Angelica was collecting videos and stills to put together something pretty extensive, but
Okay, good.
I think it would be a good idea to actually have somebody, they're living history experts who are actually very skilled at interviewing people and turning it into coherent English. When we listed all the things that the water and sewer department did just for the water and sewer meeting, I'm like, well, we've got the recording, but who's going to go back and watch the recording? I really would like to have something that we could put into the Times Inc. or elsewhere that really documents what all the people did.
Mhm.
And, with photos too, videos too, but, some of us may want to just forget this, but I think it's nice to, be able to look back and say, remember when, and also to give people credit for what they've done.
Well, the only good thing that can come out of it is that kind of legacy of neighborliness and all that stuff and caring. So to play that up is a good thing, I think.
Okay, so something to think about. But yes, it sounds like we're all in agreement that we should wait a little while before having this event. Now,
You have a question from the audience?
oh, hey Patty, go ahead.
I've been very impressed. Oh,
Yeah, come up here so we can see and hear you.
Patty Brushett. I've just been so impressed with the comments on Front Porch Forum and how volunteers really did so much of the organizing through that spreadsheet and so forth. I think one of the things I've been thinking about doing is copying and pasting all of these posts during the flood about what neighbors were saying to neighbors. As well as, I mean, there's some, the woman that put the spreadsheet together, for instance, it would be great to acknowledge her as there were a lot of volunteers that did a lot of heavy lifting. She posted today or yesterday that over 100 people were on that spreadsheet volunteering. I mean, that spreadsheet would be just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, take a snapshot of it.
So, I mean, I feel like a resilient Richmond would be a lovely opportunity for not just our employees, but for us to celebrate how we responded to this event. And it doesn't have to be, some big elaborate thing, but it'd be nice to acknowledge all the volunteers.
Absolutely. There are a number of things that MMCTV is always looking for more footage. They want to give people due disclosure. I'm president of the board. They're always looking to give people a reason to tune in. And they have cameras over there, and they would love to have people get interviewed and share their stories. There's probably sites, I can imagine there must be sites where you would log in and share your story, and then somebody could compile them. Because I think that this is stuff that should not be quickly forgotten.
Now, I'll volunteer to grab the stuff up from Porch Forum, and I'll just, it felt like poetry initially when it came in. I just felt like this is like an ongoing poem of this terrible thing that had happened and how beautiful the people of Richmond are.
Maybe an ice cream social. Worked for ARPA.
That's true.
It was fun. I bet you we could get an ice cream donation.
Uncomplicated too.
Okay. Let's move on to our next agenda item, an update on the discussion with Hinesburg regarding police governance. Briefly, Bard and I and Josh met with Todd Odett, who's Hinesburg Town Manager, and Hinesburg Police Chief Anthony Cambridge on Thursday. And I'm not going to motor out this whole discussion. I'm going to let Josh basically do the discussion and share the information, but we have a framework, but not anything in writing yet for contracting with the town of Hinesburg. We're looking at something that would go through the end of the next fiscal year. Because Hinesburg made a request that if they're going to take on the staffing to be able to support an arrangement like this, it needs to be long enough that we don't just pull the rug out from under them after 3 months, because then they still have a position to pay for. But the rest of it, Josh, you probably do better. Or Bard, do you want to?
Bard's more eloquent on this topic than I am.
Well, I don't know if that's-
You very much are, sir.
You'll be the judge. I would, excuse me. I was going to say, by way of introducing this topic, one other item is that we had a meeting with folks from Hinesburg and the state police at Williston, who said a couple of things, including, well, they sort of assumed that our police department had disbanded, so they were inclined not to deal with their dispatch. But when it became clear, like, it still existed, we just didn't have any active officers at the moment, that they would then re-engage in dispatch. But just parenthetically, one other comment, they said they have no interest in contracting with the town of Richmond for police services. In fact, they very much want this town and other towns to provide their own police services based on their capacity and staffing level. So that's, I know that comes up intermittently. Let's have the state police do it. Waterbury at one point had contracted with the state police. I will say they were very clear, as to be blunt, like, we're not at all interested in doing that. We will provide, this is them speaking, backup services and emergency response, but they are so thin. There will be times that the trooper will be 45 minutes away, and they can't get here within anything less than 45 minutes. So that's the kind of service that you could routinely expect based on their current staffing. And
Right, they have a lot of open positions on the state police.
so that's really introductory. And then maybe, Josh, we could frame this in a couple of different pieces, which is contracting for police services. And then we talked about contracting for chief services, because it's obvious we don't have a chief, and that our recent chief recruitment has not been really fruitful. And then the third is a longer term engagement or mutual governance of some kind of shared department. So that third one is kind of on the medium to long term track. The first two are on a short term track. And the conversation was for a longer duration, to do this for a year, where they have both current full staffing, and then they have candidates that they could hire or retain for a longer period of time. They just don't have the budget. Conversely, we have the budget, but not the officers. So there is a sort of natural arrangement to be made. And so we had an initial meeting that talked conceptually about, let's do it for this fiscal year, which is through June 24. And have two pieces: what's it take for patrol services and response, and what does it take for chief services, which is the organization, supervision, management, coordination with Josh and their town manager, Todd, about how that works. So those things are starting to move forward. And then we also because we have collective bargaining agreement with the union, we have another party who's interested, obviously, in how this plays out, representing not only whatever officers might currently exist, but future officers, because they have collective bargaining for the police department, not just the current incumbents or employees. And what's one other thing that I would observe, for those of you who have not been a close observer to regional dispatch, there's been talk about regional dispatch in Chittenden County for apparently something like 40 years. And it actually has not achieved what it meant to achieve in terms of combining into a single regional dispatch center. that includes some of the same issues afoot here, which is about governance. And one of them was also different collective bargaining agreements for the existing dispatch staff. And the collective bargaining or union representatives want to make sure nobody's going to get paid less as a result of this, right? So then what you do is raise people from a lower rate wage to the prevailing highest wage. And that then gets sort of challenging. And then how do you govern it? Who's in charge? So that's a little more, it's simpler, but more complicated because of scope, being all of Chittenden County and potentially beyond. I still think there is something to be done both short term with Hinesburg that's sort of medium term to extend the contract longer. And then to re-engage in a discussion about, sort of a mutually agreeable arrangement into the longer term. Another key point for Hinesburg is they have done a
Study.
strategic planning exercise for their emergency services to the tune of something like $90,000 with contractors, and their report and project they anticipate to be finished in September.
And so our proposal was to take a copy, do a search and replace.
Say thank you very much.
Lisa,
Bart, question, the union or unions representing Hinesburg's,
They don't have collective bargaining, as I understand.
I was surprised to hear that.
they do have or
Do not.
do not have, okay.
I think they
So,
might have
so I
a
was wondering about
union,
the
but no
FOP,
collective
PBA.
bargaining.
yes.
agreement.
So
They
I
have a
think,
union, but no collective.
They have their own little
Yes.
homebrew union. They're not part of the NECBPA.
And they haven't ever
It's a
put
different
together a
union.
contract.
so they, as I understand it, they voted to create a collective bargaining unit, but have never actually engaged in collective bargaining. So there is no collective bargaining agreement, and it's sort of a de facto.
Then let's not feel the urge then. I mean, they got the piece
Yeah.
in place, but that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you make of that arrangement,
Yeah.
it's kind of a.
They haven't needed it.
So, one thing that has been puzzling me is how do we have a collective bargaining agreement when we don't have anybody who can collectively bargain?
The police department has not been legally established, and there's basically an agreement, a legally bounding agreement between organization X and organization Y. You can't just say we have no officers, therefore it's moot, because our department technically still exists, and we could have somebody walk in here tomorrow and say, I'd like to work for you.
But who would hire them? We don't have any. Well, my understanding is the way that we are organized and statutorily is the police chief has it's his own mandate, his or her own mandate above and beyond what the town manager is. So, they do the hiring, so, and we don't have one, and we likely won't for some time. So, I was talking with Josh earlier this week about, it's confusing to me, to have this collective bargaining agreement. A union by definition is two or more people. We don't have two or more people.
I think the union is clear that they have a collective bargaining agreement that applies to all past, present, and future employees of that department from the start date and end date of that collective bargaining agreement. So, it's like an agreement, the fact that nobody's there is not particularly daunting for them. And also just, factually, there is an officer in a position who's in a deployment. So you could argue he's not actively represented, but he is still technically an employee.
And his deployment goes through
officer.
September.
Okay, yeah.
So his deployment goes through September. Now, mind you, this is Officer Wilson we're talking about. He's been volunteering for a lot of deployments. He's not been just, National Guard is just not continually deploy people. And we've asked him, I believe, to kind of say, could you please decide, do you want to be a military officer? Do you want to be a Richmond police? Keep us hanging. And he is receptive to the idea of coming back here to work. He simply has not gotten approval from the Army to do that. But that would be back to the point that Bard and Josh mentioned about chief services. If we do have an officer, or we suddenly have a whole influx of people saying, I want to be an officer, but I'm just out of the academy, we need somebody to give to be their supervisor.
Well, to mentor them too.
So in the near term, there is two parts to a contract that we would negotiate, and I, knock on wood, would hope to close that sooner rather than later, that we modify and extend our existing contract with Hinesburg to be explicit about patrol services, responses, and also chief services, some administrative work and supervision. And that's where we left it last week sometime. When did we last meet, Josh?
Yeah, it was after the flood. It was Thursday, last
Yeah.
Thursday.
So, and then we need to move that forward in terms of what is the contract actually saying, what are the rates? They did express some interest in reviewing the rates because I think they went into this thinking this is
Yeah.
going to be really short term, it'll be a couple of months. Now, if you're looking at for a year or two, you have to, if you're the person contracting your services, you have to make sure that you deal not only with your direct wages, but your indirect costs and overhead.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you
It's
know,
only fair, yeah.
and it's typical, you might pay an employee $30 an hour, but the cost, when you add everything up, including equipment and total compensation, health insurance, could be $90 an hour.
There are other discussed things we talked about, like what cars would they drive? If we have officers that are Hinesburg employees, but they are essentially tasked to staff the town of Richmond, would they drive Richmond cruisers? And I believe the consensus was they would. Is that, or do you
I
not
don't
miss
think
one?
we reached the.
It was raised. It was,
Yeah.
it's one of the things we have to hash out.
So I would, I would hope that, the contract that we have right now with Hinesburg is, I think it's 2 pages. And it's pretty basic. It's pretty bare bones because we were in a different situation at that time. I actually would hope that this contract would be a lot more explicit. There, even the chief services, like maintenance of our vehicles, whether they're driven or not,
Right.
training, what kind of training do they go through, data collection, all the things that we wanted to do before.
Right.
If we have any interest in actually eventually having a joint service between Hinesburg and ourselves, this could be a dress rehearsal for that. I mean, we
It could be.
put into it what we think we would want to have and see how it works. And then we have time to change it. before-
We also talked about chain of command because
Yeah, that's the other
it's
one.
important that we have control over how policing is handled in our town, even if we're paying somebody else to do it. And for example, on July 4th, I was getting calls saying, we have extra officers, where do you want them to go? And I thought, why are you asking me? Ask Josh. But it turned out Josh had said, ask Jay.
Well, because Jay was in charge of the event.
Yeah.
And I wanted to
yeah,
know what
I
he
mean,
needed. I wanted to know what he needed.
Ultimately, it would be, the contract needs to specify
Yeah.
that Josh can
exactly.
state, this is the road I want you to patrol. This is where I want you to be. This is the donut shop I want you to.
Well, and that's sort of the way it's been working with me and Chief Cambridge so far is these are high priority roads. So he and I have been going back and forth on where they need to be. But yes, defining the chain of command is important.
So Lisa, I think it's an eloquent, I've used various metaphors to describe, you start small
Yeah.
and then like, where do you anticipate being a year or two from now?
Mhm,
And plan a trajectory of this next year,
mhm.
thinking that that's where we might end up.
Sure, have our core needs, but
Right.
maybe like to haves or like to try.
Yeah,
sort of things.
But there's, I believe we discussed this, there have been so many meetings, but the contract also needs to spell out that we will follow community policing principles. They will follow fair and impartial policing policies. But that's important to us, that we don't actually really want a police department that consists of people hanging out behind ski and snowboard express watching for speeders all the time. We need people who know the residents of Richmond. I mean, that there's a value in that, but we need police that we know and can connect to.
Yeah, that's what our community wants.
That's
more than
definitely what the
anything
community
else,
wants.
I think, and maybe it's simplistic, but it's still real. It's a real desire.
It's just a foundational value. I mean,
Yeah. it's-
we don't want big
it's a way
city
to-
policing where there's a divide between us and them.
Somebody described this a while ago. I can't remember if it was a conversation or something I read that talked about the sort of identity and culture of police. And this may be a false dichotomy, but it was described as warrior or guardian.
Yes.
And in a lot of places, people have developed a warrior culture,
Mhm.
which makes sense if you've come back from Iraq or Afghanistan and you're military police or on patrol there, and everybody you meet is potential like antagonist.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, again, arbitrarily and extreme kind of and breed a warrior culture, and really what you want is a guardian culture knowing that also at the end of the day, if, for instance, there is somebody with firearms shooting at people, you need somebody who's capable of dealing with that as well.
Anthony,
Hi, yeah, sorry, I just came in. I think a lot of these things are, inherent to who we should be as police officers. If I think if some of these things we have to map out, then we definitely have the wrong police officers. Aesop said an act of kindness, no matter how small, is never lost. If you have to tell police officers to be kind, then you're starting in the wrong spot.
the reason I think we mentioned that in part, Anthony, is when I first joined the board, how many years, 2.5 years ago, 2 years, we were trying, Richmond Racial Equity and others were trying to get the police to officially sign on to the idea of fair and impartial policing. And acting chief, Chief Kapitansky at the time, I would say he basically paid lip service to. He's like, yeah, we do that. But there was never, he did not refer people to Wilson Community Justice. They didn't get training. It was, I think lip service is a pretty accurate way of putting it. And we need police in this town who, that's why we say, map it out. We shouldn't have to put in a contract, you will comply with fair and impartial policing, but I don't think it hurts to put it there.
And I'll just add, Jay, I think it's illustrative that I think, especially in a small town department with a handful of officers, it's really the significance of the chief in establishing expectations and culture is really, I think, very significant. Arguably, it's really significant in any department, but it's so much clearer in a very small department. If you have 5,000 officers, the trickle down of policy from a chief or a commissioner to the patrol officer is somewhat tenuous. But in a small town, it's really direct. You have meetings and everybody's in the room, right? It's and so that's just it to state sort of the obvious that a lot of this, what you get is heavily influenced by who we hire as a chief and then who they hire and train as officers.
And for onboarding new staff, I mean, in the future, they come into a culture it's either headed the way we've hoped or it's not.
Right. Some of the officers we might wind up hiring could be very new out of the academy. And they need mentoring.
Exactly.
Exactly.
One of the things that I've noticed with Hinesburg so far, is that they get out of their cars, they walk around Volunteer Green, they say hello, they seem to like it. They seem to like meeting people. I think they've gotten a really warm response from Richmond because we haven't had this experience before. Our departments have never done this. They've never been this outgoing. And it's back beyond Chief Kapitansky,
Chief Buck, yeah.
Chief Buck had the same attitude about the fair and impartial policing policy, and I'm excited about it. I think it seems like it, we have an opportunity here that seems like it could work for both communities.
So is there, go ahead.
No,
Okay. Is there a point where we need to come to a decision on keeping the police force that we have or just keeping the union that we have or just?
well, we don't legally have the power to say the union. I don't think it's as simple as just saying we don't want to deal with the union anymore.
Okay, but
It's something that we can discuss. Let's see how this works. Like you said, I think this could be the first step toward, I believe you said, the proof of concept of a joint district. And if and when that happens, I mean, I don't think there's a member on this board who wouldn't like to see a joint district. We've all spoken in favor of it. And when that comes, if we sign on as members of the Hinesburg Richmond joint district.
Richmond Hinesburg.
Right. And we legally, it's like hauling the flags down on the League of Nations as you're raising the flags on the UN, At that point, I'll happily stand by as we play taps on the Richmond Police Department if we feel like this is working.
okay, so that's a later question.
Right now, the main things are we have to have our town attorney talk to their town attorney, and we have to talk to the union before we can really do anything. Connie.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
My name is Connie Van Egan. I'm a resident of Richmond. I am a few other things for this town as well. One is a member of Richmond Racial Equity, which is a group that we all helped start 3 years ago after the killing of George Floyd. I'm also the clerk for your housing committee, and I'm also a board member of the Our Community Care. And all of those things are related in a way to the community's health and wellness. And so I just wanted to remind you all that this statement reflects much of what you're already saying. And all of it actually is work that you've already supported, approved, helped Richmond Racial Equity do, or actually written a policy about. But I wanted to remind you that the future of our police department hasn't been figured out yet. We might have some wonderful opportunities ahead of us, but whatever those opportunities are, with whatever organization, whether it's internally supported or whether it's externally contracted, there's some things that Richmond Racial Equity says, we've been working on this. We want all of us to continue to value it. So this statement, which I'll read aloud, which is also appearing on chat for those who'd like to read it there, says Richmond Racial Equity expects that any police working or contracting, any in the future, with Richmond be required to engage and report on education and training on racial profiling, collect and report crime and traffic data, use alternative justice venues, just like the Community Justice Center is one of those, and have a thorough understanding of an agreement to follow Richmond's no mas polygraph policy.
Great.
All of that is work that we've already done and is great to have, and we want to continue to work on and develop and to help in any way we can as a community of citizens. Furthermore, the rest of the statement reads, the leadership of the Richmond Police Department, if working or contracting with Richmond, is required to meet with community members in regular forums, like quarterly, for example, in person and through electronic media, to review police activities, aggregate data and trends, a word that should be different there, and future plans. This is work we haven't yet done in terms of meetings, but was proposed a year ago and is something that we've been working towards. Making this explicit in an agreement means that it becomes defined as well as objective enough to continue to work on and hold ourselves accountable to, all of us, and is something that we would like to continue to help work on.
Okay, you go first.
Just my request is if you could send this as an email to Josh and myself so we can share it with Anthony and Todd.
Absolutely.
And note that the language as presented is sort of aspirational, but would have to be massaged to actually appear in the contract.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
It would
Yes.
be, like,
Yeah.
it would read differently, but then it becomes part of the negotiation with Hinesburg about the contract.
great. But I see absolutely nothing in this that I don't thoroughly endorse. For example, the forums, we've talked a long time about having forums.
Yeah.
Last meeting, I kind of just held one because it was on the agenda for 30 minutes and we did 90. And I don't think we turned away a single person who wanted to speak. And I think that, they say sunshine is the best disinfectant. We need to give people a chance to air their concerns instead of just saying, well, we'll get to them when we have time.
That's good.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. The other comment I think is, and I'm just sort of appreciating what it's going to be like for Hinesburg, like what are our expectations of them? And so would we do that kind of meeting here and invite them to participate, or be a separate meeting? That's all I think is subject to negotiation for the contract. So I don't think there's any disagreement about what's in here. It's just what would the contract say to follow through? And it's just sort of an awkward stage. It would be so much easier if we had an established chief and a staff officer, but we're in this kind of transitional state, I guess.
State of ambivalence.
Well,
Ambiguity. Yeah.
transitions are opportunities.
Yes.
So thank you for making this work. And thanks again for listening.
Thank you.
It's worth mentioning that as we've been spending this meeting talking about the strength of our community in terms of the resilience and helping each other out. I mean, that really underlies what we want out of a police department. It's what we want out of any department of this town.
Right.
We like the idea of knowing our highway employees, be able to say, hey, how you doing? Like the idea of being able to, if we want to, blow into the water treatment plant and just hang out and enjoy the ambience. And the same thing goes for police. I mean, we want police that we feel are our neighbors and not troops. I've always been concerned when I hear about the US government selling surplus military equipment, things that are virtually tanks to police departments, and the police departments just line up to get them. It's like, pardon me, but you live in a town of 5,000 people. Why do you need a tank?
Or a Humvee.
Whatever happened to Humvee? It was expensive to run and we sold it, or what?
I'll tell you something that I find more disturbing, frankly, and it's in addition to this. There was a point, I saw a photo of one of the unpleasant events of 4 or 5 years ago, where I think it was in Missouri, where,
Ferguson.
yes, Ferguson, there's an APC on top of it. You can't make this up. There was a guy with a 50 caliber machine gun pointed at the ground. There is no rule of engagement in the US military that says you point a 50 caliber machine gun at anybody unless you're ready to pull the trigger. And I don't know what a 50 caliber machine gun does.
Oh, sure.
Why would you be,
It turns things into a red mist is what it does.
why would you bring a 50 caliber machine gun into your community? It's just kind of insane.
It is.
I don't have 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next item on the agenda, again, I want to thank everybody who came to support Richmond Racial Equity and all of those of you who participated in drafting that statement. Our next item on the agenda is follow-up on consideration of selling one or more police cruisers. If you would be so kind as to bring up the usual sheet. Last week, we reviewed the numbers on mileage, years. We've acknowledged that one of the reasons we've been very reluctant to sell a cruiser is if we ever did have a full staff, but we sold off the cruisers, there's an 18-month replacement cycle to get more cruisers. At this point, that seems kind of academic. But as you can see, we have we have 5 cruisers, not counting the Tesla.
Oh, okay.
And then we have the Tesla. And the mileage is in the center column here. We have one that's at $102,000, and then we have 3 that are between 50 and 70 miles, right? And it is on the table as to whether we sell 1, 2, 3, or 0. So what do people think?
We don't need 6 vehicles.
No.
Mhm.
It's not lost on me that these are much, much harder to acquire than they are to dispose of. It's also not lost on me that they're sitting out in the parking lot depreciating. And as Jack pointed out, the rodents are more than happy to move them. The brakes are, my personal opinion, we should sell the 17s. I can't think of a justification for keeping them.
We have 2? I thought we just had 1.
Maybe we have 2.
The two ports, the first, number 1,
Cruiser
number
1
3,
and 3.
number 1. and number-
I was looking at the year acquired. I'm so sorry. Do I?
I think initially that would make sense. We don't know what we'll need next month, 2 months from now, 3 months from now. In my opinion, it's more than likely that any agreement we engage with Hinesburg will also require the use of our cruisers. So I think we'd be very foolish to sell them and then be in the situation of looking for them. I think tonight I would propose selling 17s and then holding off on the rest for now.
I'll just point out, some time ago, we anticipated deferring this decision and plan to a chief, and we don't have. Right. But we do have the Hinesburg chief participating today, so, and I know it's a little unfair to ask Anthony to comment.
What he's thought about it.
No, he's right there.
If, his thoughts, because this is sort of, it's kind of tentative. What do we do in the near term and what are the implications for medium to long term? It certainly seems sensible to me to sell the 217s as a person.
Anthony, would you like to contribute?
Sure. I think selling the 4s is a good idea. The value is certainly deteriorating every day. I would suggest getting what we can out of them and including the equipment that right now may be usable for another new incoming police car at some point, but if we continue to let it sit, might not be.
Point of clarity, Anthony, when you say the Fords, do you mean number 1, number 3, and number 5, or just number 1 and number 3? Because there's 3 Fords up there.
I would say that the two oldest Fords, I'm not sure. I know I would say certainly the one that has the physical damage to it.
If that,
I just noticed that
Yeah.
Which one? Were
last week.
you driving it?
One of the Fords on the passenger side.
Yes, it's scraped.
It's scraped in, especially the rear door.
I don't know which one it is though. I don't know. Which one. Do you know which one it is, Anthony?
I'm not sure, and the one with the high mileage as well.
Might be the same one.
And do we know how that happened?
I think it was a call that Allison was on at some point.
Yeah, it was Allison's call. I'm guessing 5, but don't hold me to that.
Duncan's been involved in the VLCT claim on that one.
Okay.
Well, so what, I'm just sort of calling the question, like number 1 and number 3 seems easy. Do we want to add number 5? Oh, and before, in case Anthony is called away, Anthony, do you have any comments on the Tesla? This was another thing that we were going to defer to the next chief.
Again, I think I said at last meeting, the amount of money that was put into the Tesla plus the time and the amount of, what it took to get equipment inside a Tesla, because it was certainly my line of thinking about whether to get an electric car for Hinesburg, is that they're just not ready yet to put in police equipment. Now, from my understanding, talking to Kyle when he was doing it, he went through a lot of trouble to get that equipment in. So to spend all of that time and money, which was probably upwards of $80,000, and then to sell a car for 20, I think it would be wise to get get what mileage we can out of that car.
I agree.
I'm going to ask a dumb question. If we're thinking about selling, are we nervous that we would sell the 2 oldest Fords, keep number 5, and then find out that one's got damage and then go, gee, I wish we'd sold that one too? Or do we just want to have done with it and sell 3 Fords?
We could sell 2 tonight and then.
Sell another in the week? Yeah.
The next meeting.
Hey, different suggestion. Since we don't have enough people to drive them, and I don't think Hinesburg would need them all, why don't we put 2 in some kind of preservation or storage, at least for the moment, and stop the appreciation of them a little bit. I mean, they're rusting, they're sitting outdoors.
That'd be not I have no idea how you do
not
that.
running. Pickle the engine,
Yeah.
put them up on blocks, something like that. Give them to David.
David must know.
He knows how. That at least would
already
preserve
got
their
it.
value a little better.
Well, I have a suggestion, it's not an insignificant task to sell a car, particularly a police car, and getting rid of all the equipment and all of that. This is an administrative task. Right now, that would fall to Josh. Josh might have a couple of other things that he might be doing these days.
That too.
My suggestion would be to put this in the discussions with Hinesburg and have, at whatever point, have the Hinesburg chief, Anthony, give us a proposal. What would his recommendation be on how to go about doing this? And, do some research on it. What are its values? What are the different values of the different cars?
I really prefer to go ahead and sell them, because every week that they sit out there, they continue to depreciate, and the townspeople keep giving us hell about why do we have all these cars that we have no drivers for.
Is Anthony still with us?
I do not know. Is he in the participant list?
I'll make one observation about practices. So
No.
our practice in Richmond for some unknown number of years has been to give cruisers to officers to drive home. Sometimes a fair distance. Collective bargaining agreement has some language, and I think we attenuated the distance for new officers. But you still have a cruiser to drive home under the collective bargaining. Conversely, my memory of Hinesburg that is not a standard. practice.
Correct. They do not.
That you don't get a cruiser to drive home. It is also correlated with the distance, so if you hire people who live locally, there's less arguably need to take a cruiser home. Some people don't want a cruiser parked in front of their house. It is my observation that it is reminiscent of a state police culture where you take the cruiser home because you could be called out and be going anywhere from your home versus drive to the station
Mhm.
or the barracks and then leave from there. I just point that out because the practices around the use of the cruisers is a little different between the two towns currently. All of which leads me to conclude that we ought to start selling them. And I think number one and number three.
Can we have that in the form of a motion?
I would move that we move forward with disposing of cruiser 1 and cruiser 3 through a sale and whatever is prudent in terms of the equipment, either keeping it or selling it to another department. To have arguably input from perhaps Anthony or other police about the mechanics of that, what makes the most sense.
I will
I'm not sure we
second
need
that.
to decide here.
I will second that, Bart. I just want to stipulate that the two 2017 cruisers. And I would want a minimum bid built into the disposal process, so we don't end up selling it for $500 or something.
Like in the Blues Brothers.
That with that amendment, sure.
We did very
Okay.
well selling the last one.
Okay, so we have a motion to sell. Go ahead, Josh.
The last one we sold that I recall, we literally got like $500 for it. Because it was so old.
Got 8,000 something for it.
Was that maybe a trade-in that we
No,
did?
went to the auction.
Okay, so that's, I guess, some questions I have is how do we want to sell this? Like, do we want to sell it whole as is with all the equipment? Do we want to, and who strips the equipment out? Do we keep
Those are
it? Like,
decisions
those
I
are,
don't Feel comfortable making. I think you and.
we need to get some research and come back
Yeah.
with how do we, because I mean, we might go to an auctioneer and they might say, give it to me with all the equipment and I get
Yeah.
top dollar.
I
But
think that,
I think we might need to come back before we make a decision with, here's information on options.
So
or
putting
we could
this-
defer that to say, you know, the mechanics of it, defer to Josh Duncan, maybe with input from Anthony, what's the best way to get rid of these? Because I would also suggest, you know, as we talked about this, I don't want to take another month or two talking about it. I'd like to sort of move forward expeditiously
Yeah.
to dispose of number 1 and number 3.
Well,
So
sell
putting
one
this-
with the equipment in it. Would that make it more saleable?
I
to-
suspect
to-
it would.
To a force that needs a car like right now.
Right, to know that that it's turnkey cars ready to go, albeit old,
Right.
versus it's a
Strip down and.
100, you know,
transportations, yeah.
So if we're gonna go, I mean, we might just, because I don't, the last one that I sold was like, when I first got here, it was,
Oh, yeah. that was
Junk.
$500.
and we basically just put a couple ads out, best offer, we got $500.
Yeah.
It seems like with this one, the best way to go would be to contact some of those auction houses, get advice from them, and then if the board's comfortable, if they come back and say, a fully equipped police car is gonna get you more than a not fully, if you guys are comfortable with us making that decision, then we can make that decision and move forward.
Would there be any secondary market for the equipment?
Well,
Yes.
that's, but some of it doesn't fit on certain, I mean, I don't know, I wish
I'm
Anthony
very
was.
accustomed to that make and model.
That's
car.
the thing. I think some of it is customary.
So I would propose clarifying the amendment to simply say, we move that we sell the two 2017s and leave the mechanics to Josh to work out.
Yeah, with the goal of achieving the greatest financial return.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that would include things like a minimum bid. Do we separate the equipment?
And there is a municipality in the state that tragically just lost 2 Ford Explorer police pursuit vehicles. There might be an.
Which one is that?
opportunity.
Oh,
We know how it's a lot harder to acquire a police vehicle than dispose of a police vehicle. There might be an opportunity to equitably dispose of these and help them.
Carefully put.
We'd still have to do
It's an
some sort of
interesting idea.
a bid process, but if they're willing to bid whatever, we could do a bid process knowing we got at least one bid.
So I'd point out that the Fords are only marked cars.
Oh, no, the Tesla is marked.
Yeah,
Wow.
but you can't see it.
I think we can work. I mean, right now, I think that's a pretty, yes, when they become drivable, when they're being driven, we should mind them. But right
Yes.
now, we're not gonna drive.
Want to point that out.
I hear you, yes.
Just take them to Yike Stripes and see here.
That's where they go.
Well, that's actually exactly, I mean, right before Ben resigned, he was in process of getting that done. But then he resigned and then we had a flood, so we haven't done it yet. Probably haven't had the flood for a while.
But, you know, another thing that, you know, I would like to see as an administrative task for our interim, I don't know what you call, the Hinesburg Police Chief, but is inventorying our equipment. So
Yes.
this would be a part of it, you know, if we, even if we strip it out. Okay, but it'd be good to be, if it was on an inventory and where is it going to be stored and how is that, all of that.
Okay,
I just read that there are 200 in one of the warrants, there's 250 shredder bags that we bought. Are we planning on shredding all our police records or something? Or it just hit me as odd. So,
well, we don't have a shredder on premises, so Linda periodically just has stuff that has people's financial details. Connie, probably the same thing.
okay,
And you just toss them in there and somebody comes by once a week and pick up.
that sounds.
You shred. probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have we have two. We actually do have a shredder, a small machine, but yes, about a year ago, we got the box where it just goes in, they come take the bag and then they shred it.
Okay.
Okay, is there any further discussion before we go to a vote on the cruisers?
Can I ask one question? Do we want to preserve one or two of the remaining cars? At least one, and say, put it aside, baby it. I don't know,
Well, that's
pickle it.
that's something for you
Should-
to do, because I don't know how to do it.
Separate from this motion, maybe after.
It's separate, yes. I don't want to complicate.
Okay.
things, yeah.
So all in favor of the motion, which is made by David Sanders, seconded by Bart Hill, I think. No,
Other way around.
it's made by Bart Hill, seconded by David Sanders to sell the two 2017s with the specifics left up to our town manager to settle
With the goal of achieving the
the
highest.
greatest financial return.
Lisa, aye?
I'm going to say nay, only because I would prefer to leave this up to somebody else. And I'm still concerned about Josh's time.
David,
Part A.
J.I. Okay, now let's talk about preserving. What does one do to preserve a vehicle that you're not planning on driving? Do you like encase it in cosmoline and put it in a warehouse or?
ideally, you put a battery tender on the battery, disconnect the battery, park it inside. And there's a lot of debate as to whether rodent deterrence
Oh.
works or not,
Yeah.
but it's far less likely to be inhabited by rodents if it's in a building than in a parking lot.
Preservative oil in the engine.
Yeah, every spring when I go out to my garden tractor, I have to take the mouse nest out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And we've hung dryer sheets and mothballs all over the thing, which is the latest, huh?
I love them.
My wife swears that it's gonna make a difference. Like, no, every year we have to take the mouse nest out.
Yeah.
They seem to be unstoppable.
Stabilizer, battery tender,
Yeah.
pump the tires and
How much would that cost to set up and then do for a year?
not much.
Oh, really?
It's just.
Are there vehicle storage places where you could just stick it in there?
Well, the hardest part is just finding a place. I mean, I know highway doesn't have room for three
No.
vehicles.
No.
The fire department, I doubt has room. for
No,
three vehicles.
definitely not.
Mhm.
So is this something that might merit? I'm sensitive to Jeff's comment and a nay vote here. Some other research says if we wanted to store these in a place where they are going to deteriorate more slowly, what would it be and who would do it and where would it be?
Yeah,
I know some of the self-storage facilities have bays large enough to take a car.
it's possible that
Mhm.
the state police would want to store it for a couple months.
So TBD, but definitely worth following up on. We don't want them to
It's sitting
see.
out in the parking lot.
That's,
not
yeah.
the
I would agree with that.
It's, the optics are bad, plus it's not good stewardship of the town asset.
So I point out that Duncan says that the damage is on a 2017. That's good.
Yay.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Duncan.
Yeah, I think that's Cruiser 3, but I'm not sure.
Is this something, this general, like research, which is probably half a day or something that we could ask Duncan or somebody else to?
Yeah, I was gonna probably ask Duncan, I was asked Chief Cambridge if he has some expertise on auction sites or what his thoughts were on equipment versus no equipment, and if that is one of the damaged ones, I'll have to check and see where we're at with the claim with VLCT, but do we get it repaired before we sell it, or we just stop that and just sell it as is?
Well, we collect the damages, but sell the car.
Yeah, actually, that is the way to do it.
Oh, okay.
That is a viable path, right?
Yeah.
We can collect the money, not do the repair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
And-
I've done
and
that
you-
with- I've
If
done
we're
that with
being
several
reimbursed for the loss of our value.
Yeah.
Oh, right, and then we're selling it for less value.
Or you're driving around with a dinger and people do their own.
Yeah, I do that
Yeah,
all the time.
They put a big red circle around.
You know, the buyer might not care if the door is dented.
Yeah, I think it's a back, is a door or quarter panel, either way, yeah, all right, I'll work that out, but that's good, I hadn't thought about.
But what it-
Money and sell it for less.
And for what it's worth, that enormous U-Haul thing in Williston,
Yeah.
you know, the one that you can see from orbit,
You can see, yeah, you can see it from space.
they will store cars.
Interesting.
And they're climate controlled and stuff, so.
Right.
$400 a month.
Yeah, well, it would cost $200 a month, give or take, but per car. So if we have a cheaper option, but otherwise.
Good.
Okay, our
A
next,
couple months ago, I could have helped you out.
you can't get into his warehouse, legal reasons. Less said about that, the better.
Great.
Okay, our next item on the agenda, which is actually the last item before warrants, purchase orders and that kind of thing, is a request from Planning and Zoning Director Keith Oborn. He would like to request that the select board consider waiving all permit fees associated with any flood damage. He notes that we cannot waive the need for a permit, but we do have control over the fee structure. And he has drafted a draft motion, which is in your packet. Comments, thoughts? Bart?
There's just a wild hair thought. Can we ask FEMA to pay for the? I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
damage, cost of like repairing and replacement. Yeah, arguably is eligible for FEMA reimbursement if it's going to private party.
I don't know, we could,
But
Follow-up question, could we waive the fees charged tonight, but then at a future point seek reimbursement from FEMA?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
where I was
that's what, that's, yeah.
And we think if we think that'll legally work, I'm all for it.
Because
yeah.
charging people a permit fee to put their life back together after a tragedy
Yeah,
is
this makes no
in
sense.
poor taste.
Yeah.
Arguably, we have the fees to recoup the administrative costs for whatever, but these aren't people deciding, oh, I'm gonna put a bigger deck on the back of my house. These are people trying to restore their property that was lost through no fault of their own.
Maybe we can modify the motion to have a caveat about FEMA reimbursement.
I think that's a smart way to go.
Okay,
So I would propose that per the power granted to the select board and the development permit fee schedule, footnote 7, I move that the town of Richmond Select Board approve the request from the Department of Planning and Zoning to waive any development permitting fees associated with recent flooding events of July 10th through the 17th, 2023. The requirement for permits in the special flood hazard overlay district and all other districts shall still apply. Only the fees are waived. And these fees may potentially be recouped in a FEMA claim.
Sure.
Maybe modify the last part to say, this waiver notwithstanding, if the permit fees are eligible for FEMA reimbursement, they will be charged to FEMA.
I like that.
okay.
Good.
So do we have a second?
Yeah. Well,
We have a motion and you've made an amendment to it, but do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, so the motion from David Sanders, second by Jeff Forward, to approve the request from the Department of Planning and Zoning to waive permitting fees associated with a special flooding event of July 10th through 17th. The requirement for permits in the special flood hazard overlay district and all other districts shall still apply. Only the fees are waived. And then pursuant to our attempts to, however we phrase that.
However, Bart said, well, it's on. Yeah.
It's on the recording,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I said.
what he
What you
said.
said, I think that's the
Okay.
way to go.
Cool. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
I'll only say that I appreciate Keith bringing this forward to us. I think this is an excellent idea. And yay. Yes.
David, I.
Part I.
And Jay, aye. Okay. Cool. Our next item of business would be approval of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders.
Jay, this is David. I would move to approve the draft minutes of the July 5th. Select.
I will second.
And we have a motion from David Sanders, seconded by Lisa Miller, to approve the draft minutes of the July 5th Select Board meeting. Is there any comment?
So this would be this is the new minute.
First new version.
You know, I noticed that you had some discussion at the water sewer about this type of. I actually like it. It doesn't look like it's a lot less work. It's still 8 pages long and it looks like he put in some time, but I like the direction that he's going towards. And I would prefer him spending his time on researching, selling police cars and other things.
But
So,
not the Tesla.
But on that subject, Jeff, there is one point of clarification that we did bring up at the water and sewer meeting. We investigated and the recordings are not legal documents, but they can certainly be referenced as supporting documents.
Okay.
So we would still have to, we could do a lot less than this and still be legal. So I think this is a good compromise. And since we do put the recordings up on the MMC website and they do have bookmarks to take you exactly specific agenda items. We're going above and beyond by doing that, even though that doesn't really satisfy any legal requirement. It's just a smart thing to do. The minutes as we're doing them now satisfy the legal requirement.
I like these minutes. You can refer to what line it is, that you're talking about out of 141 lines. And immediately everybody can go to the same place. And if you need to reference something in there. Much better than saying, well, the third paragraph, fifth word, whatever.
so
Well, the line numbers weren't in the minutes, they were in the agenda and the memo.
What I'm looking at here.
that's the memo.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Well,
We can add line numbers.
I think that was to be helpful.
I guess I overlooked it.
The line numbers,
Yeah, I
I added them to the memo because last meeting you guys were like, it's here. I was like, oh, line numbers.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It would
But we
help.
could do it in the minutes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second do we already vote on this?
No, we haven't voted it.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the minutes for David Sanders, seconded by Lisa. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David,
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye.
Jay, this is David. I want to move to approve purchase order 4650 for fire protection to the water and sewer department. In an amount not to exceed $25,574. And for clarification, this is for the fire protection portion of the infrastructure in the water and sewer department.
Okay, we have a motion for David Sanders. Do we have a second?
As Bart, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from David Sanders, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve purchase order 4650 for the water and sewer department fire protection costs in an amount not to exceed $25,574. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Our next purchase order.
So we've got purchase order 4439. This is an amendment. We're going over a little bit in trucking. The initial PO is for 9870. And we've ended here fiscal year of $10,053.75. I initially signed it because it's under 10,000, but it's now $53.75 over 10,000. So the board needs to sign it.
Okay, so the net amount that we have to move in the motion.
Is that correct?
Oh, it's that number printed in the middle there.
Well,
Increase.
that's the number that the final number we need to be at is 10,000.
53 and 75.
So you see that little place right there in the center, kind of handwritten there.
10,050.
This year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
That's the number we
amount
should say in the motion.
amended to $10,053.75.
I'll make that motion, sure. Mr. Chairman, the purchase order 4439 for trucking services to the amount of $10,053.75. Move that we approve it.
Thanks, David, I'll second.
And we have a motion from Lisa Miller to approve purchase order 4439 for trucking services in an amount not to exceed $10,053.75, seconded by David Sander. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye.
So to Jack's point, will we be seeing a lot more of these coming up because we're going to be having a lot of unexpected expenses?
Well, yeah, so this was just normal, regular trucking, probably end of gravel. But yeah, we've been trucking kind of all day and we've got, more on the way for more material that Pete needs to buy. So we're gonna see a lot coming in, but that will all, again, go towards the FEMA plan.
But we're gonna have to pay for it first.
Yes.
And then get reimbursed some fiscal years later, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Take a while.
We'll see how long it takes. I mean, the culvert one that we brought up earlier, the 2019 culvert, we didn't actually complete that work until last summer. So, I mean, yes, it takes a while. I think I got all the paperwork into them in like December or January. We still haven't even gotten initial feedback yet. So it takes time, but just to be fair, that was a 4-year lag because it took time to do the mitigation work and everything like that. The initial payout of the 2019 storm, which was a lot of the work that Pete did and maybe some small contracting work, it came in, it didn't take 4 years. It maybe a year and a half or so, because they do have to go through a lot of iterations with this. So it does take time, but I don't know that 4 years is the norm. I guess it's just what I want to clarify.
Still different fiscal year.
It
That's
will,
where I was gonna
yes.
go. It spills over into a future fiscal year, and you may recall Connie saying this at various times in the past. This is one of the reasons why they have some cash.
Yeah.
Especially, she actually referred to floods and road damage, and FEMA will take maybe 2 years to pay you back.
Yeah.
So if you're out $500,000 in repairs in this year and you don't get it back till next year, it becomes a budget.
Maybe we don't want to do these CDs quite so frequently, or maybe we'll need to take out a
Yeah.
short-term loan.
I think right now, because Tony and I talked, right now, I think we're okay even with the 3 CDs that we have out. We're okay for where we're at right now. But yeah, if we get hit with another flood and the
Let's not
cost
renew
keep
the
going up,
CD.
then it would have to be like a bond anticipation, well, not a bond, but some sort of anticipation note or short-term loan that we would have to go to. Right now, I think our cash flow is good. We've got, we have enough money in reserves in the bank that we can float a little bit. But it would become a problem if they had much more
We might
damage.
want to, I think we have one more CD that
So we just purchased one that got approved 2 weeks ago.
and we were thinking about doing another one in September, I think.
No, I think we asked for 3. It was like a March, but it was the last 3 months, every 2 months. So there's currently no motion on the table for an additional CD. So I think it's prudent to look at where our year end is for unassigned and restricted funds, kind of what our unexpected expenses are. Because there are some things that are changing in the last week.
Okay, we still need to vote to approve.
Yeah, there's still another
Increase
one,
one
but I
more.
wanted the few ready to go. So this one,
Is another increase.
yeah, and well, this is funny because usually Pete is like, he's usually dead on with these, if not below. And I was like, winter sand, and usually he'll buy up at the end of the fiscal year. And after I emailed him that, he said, oh, I thought I had 10,000 left. So he may well have accidentally overspent on this. We'll sort it out and figure out where we're at. We'll probably just underspend next year because he'll have stockpile that going into next year. But I think that he made a mistake, it sounds like.
Okay, so it's actually 48,000 is what this one.
48,169.02.
Going up
Yeah.
to, yeah, the final
Okay.
total was 48,169.02.
Okay, I move to approve purchase order 4401 in the amount not to exceed of $48,169.02 for washed winter sand.
Bart, I will second that.
We have a motion from Jeff Ward, seconded by Bart Hill to approve purchase order 4401 and the amount not to exceed $48,169.02 for a whole bunch of washed winter sand. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David,
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye.
Create a beach for employees.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, we want
Now,
to,
I think
yeah.
can we put the
wash
motions
band
for the
out down
23 and
on
24 warrants? Or can we do- Okay, so we got one more motion for the warrants to make.
I'll second if it is right.
I'll just do your pen again, but you guys can start. Okay, we have a motion and from David Sander, seconded by Lisa Miller to approve the warrants as presented. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David,
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, thank you all. Our next agenda item is discussing items for the next agenda.
Update on cruisers.
update on storm.
Update on-
Contract?
contract and then what the attorneys report back and what the union says.
I have a question about the collective bargaining agreement. We're supposed to start renegotiating that in January, is that right?
We are, yeah.
Okay, so like, who do we negotiate with?
It might not take long.
So, you know, it's a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting an answer
good question.
exactly. But, you know, so this is confusing and, you know, it would appear, it seemed logical to me that Hinesburg probably going to hire, if Anthony's hiring somebody, you're going to have to figure out who he's hiring him for. Like who's going to sign the paycheck? You know, is it going to be Hinesburg and then contracting? Yeah, I would think so. So,
They have a, yeah.
so
Unless we alternatively hire somebody who's a Richmond police officer
And it's supervised by,
and then is supervised. Those are two permutations.
Yeah.
I believe.
okay, so that will be interesting.
when we come to that fork in the road, we'll take it.
That's a good idea.
Thanks, Yogi.
I'll pay you your royalty later. Okay, does anybody have any item that they would merit an executive session? Being none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I had a couple of questions.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I was looking through the warrants and we're paying a CPA from Buxton, Maine.
That's our auditor.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's their choice to be from Buxton.
Yeah, so we went out to a competitive bid process last winter and they won. And I think they did a pretty good job. They were actually at like $15,000 and we had been paying about closer to 30. So after doing due diligence and research on them, we moved forward with them. They did a good job last year and they're actually ahead of the schedule for this year. They do a lot of Vermont. They do a lot of Vermont.
They gave her some good feedback.
Yeah, they came with good references.
That's the drive the car guy, right?
The other thing is, you know, our street lights cost twice what it takes to light this. I was surprised just looking at the. number.
Jeff probably can comment on that.
80 of them. 80 straight in. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't that surprised, but I was surprised. Into the difference.
We could go back to torches if you're willing to go around at night and light.
We actually.
Yeah, okay.
Lights is probably.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is David, so moved.
Dave motion and David second, Miller to adjourn.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye?
David, aye.
Part I.
And Jay, aye. Aaron. I would just like to thank you. I know that you usually look forward to these going to 11 or 11:30. I hope you won't be too brokenhearted by this ending before 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Not at all. I'm fine. Have a good night, y'all.
Thanks, Aaron.
Night.